Hello and welcome to Example of Play, the home for strategy and tactics gaming. If you're not already a subscriber, go ahead and hit that button now. Today's video is a starter guide for Infection-Free Zone. My goal in this video is to introduce you to the game, let you know what it's all about, and then work through the basic controls, the basic strategies, and everything that you need to know to be surviving the zombie apocalypse on your own. Just real quick, our agenda will be talking about the game, what is Infection-Free Zone, how to get the game started, and some basic strategy for the start. We'll go over all the controls and the UI. Then we'll talk about what you should do on the first day, how you're going to survive the first night, and then long-term goals that you'll take care of after that. So let's get started. First off, let's talk about what is Infection-Free Zone. If you don't know anything about it, this is a game set in a zombie apocalypse where you take the lead of a group of survivors as they emerge from a safe bunker back into the world that's been largely abandoned and covered in zombies. And you're gonna build a settlement and start basically rebuilding civilization. You'll be gathering survivors to your cause. You'll be researching technology and building up a base that you can expand out from, all the while dealing with zombies and other dangers that are roaming the world. The game is currently in early access, which means it's fairly bare bones right now, but fully playable with more content to come later. I like that it's one of those games that has the roadmap built into the main menu, so we can look at that real quick. Right now, it just entered early access a couple months ago and had its first big update a few weeks ago, so there's still a lot to go. Right now, the only things I've added in is no story mode, which there is a story. There are chapters, objectives that come to you as you play, but you can turn that off if you want to. And then your squad equipment, so your guys can equip different kinds of gear. And then you can see there's all kinds of stuff to come. Everything from hunting animals to having laws, stamina system, and more after that. So quite a bit to come on this game, but the base game we have right now is pretty fun to play. The twist, what makes this game kind of cool and unique, is that the map you're playing on will actually be generated from real world data. So you can pick basically any point on Earth and generate your map from that, including your hometown, where you live right now. The first map I played, I picked my college campus from where I went to school. And so that gives it a unique, cool twist that you can play. Basically, you can find your house in the game and hide from zombies in it. Or try to survive the zombie apocalypse where you went to school or where you grew up. Which brings us to our first step, starting a new game. So whenever you go to start a game, you'll come to this globe where you can see there are some preset cities that may be a little more handcrafted than others. I saw there was patch notes about cleaning up some of these cities, but really the thrill of this game is that you can basically pick anywhere on Earth and make a map from it. We'll zoom in here down in South America. Just for example, you click a spot, zoom in, and now this city, all its street data, all the buildings are there, and you will be able to find like your house or your apartment building. It's pretty much in the game. Of course, it won't look exactly the same, but you'll definitely be able to recognize it, which is a very cool feature. As far as strategy, when you're actually playing the game, you may not want to pick just anywhere because kind of the balance of the game is rural versus urban. If you go somewhere too rural where there's not very many buildings, if you just pick, let's say, somewhere out here in the northwest of the United States and there's nothing out here, you're zooming in, you're picking a starting point, there's nothing here. For the game to really work, at least right now, you need buildings that you can scavenge goods from, that you can build your base with. And so if you go way out there, there's basically nothing there. So don't do that. And also, you don't necessarily want to build in a thick, densely packed urban area either, because there's so many, the zombie population is kind of dependent on how many buildings there are. So if you do pick somewhere like New York City or something, and you can even go up here and type in any city you want and it'll search. So if you do pick like New York City and you plop down here, the game will actually warn you that, hey, this is a super densely populated area and there's going to be tons of zombies. So there will be lots of resources, but also lots of zombies. So really the sweet spot, at least for learning the game, is somewhere kind of small townish. So let's just zoom in here somewhere random. It kind of clicks when I don't want it to right there. So let's just pick, let's see, what does Bluefield look like? Okay, this might work for us. So I do like to pick somewhere that's kind of like interesting visually too. So like if you see like a downtown area, like a mall or something, the game will actually pull the names of the real streets and some of the locations. So you might, you know, build your base next to a Starbucks or something like that. So I like to pick somewhere that's kind of interesting looking in addition to the right density. This looks like a good spot. All right, so we're going to start here in Bluefield. I'm going to turn off the tutorial and story events because the story is kind of interesting. There's a few little twists and turns, and more of it's to come later. So I'll let you see that for yourself. And then the tutorial, the tutorial is in the game and does walk you through a lot, but since you're watching this video, we'll turn those off so it's not too distracting. And then once you're ready, you just hit start and away we go generating the map. Now we'll jump ahead a little bit. The first time you pick some random location, it does take a minute or so for it to load because it's generating the map from the real world data. The game warns you it might take up to 10 minutes. At least for my system, it doesn't take that long, just like a minute or two. But the first thing you'll need to do when you get into the map is select where your headquarters is going to be. This is your home for your starting survivors and basically the center of your base of operation for a while. Looking around Bluefield here, it's actually a little less dense than I even thought it was going to be, but that's okay. We're here along Valleydale Street. I like all these street names. These are like the real streets. So if you're from Bluefield, you might recognize one of this neighborhood. There's the Gospel Hall right there. And you'll see those red names are actually pulled from the map data. So you might see like a Starbucks or a Twin Peaks is some of the ones I've seen. But whenever you're picking your headquarters, a strategy tip is that right now in the current build of the game, and this might change, is subject to change. Everything I talk about subject to change because this is early access. But large buildings are harder to defend than small buildings. Just because of the way the game mechanics work. So the headquarters you pick, the bigger the building you pick, the more people it can house. So like this one, it can only house 10 people. This one, 27 people. If we found a really big building, it could house more. Here, this one's still 27. So like this wouldn't be a good choice because it's really big, but it doesn't necessarily hold more people than like these buildings hold 20. And so basically you want to pick kind of a medium-sized building. You don't want to pick a little house either. But we'll go with, let's see, there's got to be a good one, kind of a happy medium. And the other thing is you want to think long-term. It's kind of hard to see the first time you play, but you do want to think about the buildings around your starting point because you're going to want to turn those buildings into your other shelters and research center and med bay and things like that. You don't build those things from scratch. You actually convert these abandoned buildings into the new parts of your base. So let's go with this right here. It's a nice tall building. So the building being tall does help. When you have people shooting from a tall building, they can see further. They can see over the other buildings, and they are able to engage better. So this is a good spot. Lets us have decent storage and living quarters. It has some small buildings right next to it, and it's tall, so that's good. We'll click on it to make it our headquarters. Now we will go over the UI real quick. So not too exciting, but first we'll just run through the UI so you're kind of familiar with it. It's pretty simple, especially once you kind of see everything. There's nothing too complicated. We'll just go around the screen in a circle. So this first button here it just centers the camera on our headquarters. That's all it does for now. This button will show our objectives, which since we turned off tutorial and story mode, we might not get any objectives. But if you're playing the normal version with all that turned on, you would immediately get some direction, some things to do, but I'm going to give you those for the purposes of this video. Then the research panel, which we'll look at in more detail later, but pretty standard kind of tech tree. You unlock things. Right now there's not a ton of stuff in here, but basically all of it is good. It's just a matter of time of getting those things researched, and then we'll talk about how that works later. Then there is a weather forecast, which the weather right now, the biggest thing is that each day of game time basically moves time forward a month. And so during the winter months, your crops are not going to grow as well if you have like outdoor farms. So you want to have some food stored up for the winter is your biggest concern. And then occasionally there's weather that affects how the zombies behave, which we may or may not see, but pretty straightforward. Here is the mood of our citizens. So we'll have some factors of things that are making them happy or unhappy. Right now, the biggest thing is you want to keep them fed and keep them housed. And if you're able to do those things, they'll be okay. And then as you go, you can bump it up higher by getting some luxury goods and that sort of thing. Luxury being relevant for the zombie apocalypse. And basically the main thing this affects is the workers' efficiency. How well they work goes up or down with their mood, and also they might leave if they get really unhappy. Then it is April, and like I said, when the clock is running, the game goes through a day-night cycle, and each day basically moves the time forward a month. Now it is real time, but you can pause it, you can speed it up. We'll play on regular speed most of the time, but sometimes you'll want to speed it up like when there's not much going on and you're just waiting for something. Then over here are our resources. So there's food, there's canned goods, and then there's other kinds of food, which are pretty self-explanatory as you go along. There's ammo, which right now is universal. Just however many units of ammo you have, it works for all the guns. Right now there are 4 kinds of guns. We start with some pistols, which is enough to equip a couple squads, but we can find better weapons, and we can even make better weapons later. There's fuel. So we'll probably at some point find a car. You can find multiple vehicles. They need fuel, but they are very helpful of moving around the map a lot faster. And then construction materials, which we'll look at later, but you'll gather these from the map and use them to build new buildings. And then finally, there's a couple specialized things, fertilizer and medical kits, which are self-explanatory. Here is the squad panel. We'll talk about how to control your squad a bit more in a minute, but basically here you can have up to 6 squads. And you can come here to select them. You can create a new squad and manage them from here. You can also disband a squad if you don't want that many squads anymore. But we'll talk about those guys more in a minute. And then down here we can turn on some different layers for the UI, for the map. Most of them are turned on by default. We'll see them here in a minute. And you can do this to zoom out to expedition view. Eventually you can send your team out further to collect resources, kind of at the strategic level. This just centers the map. And then the radio here, if you're playing with the story on, you'll get a lot of story stuff here. But our most functional thing it can do is have our squads return to base automatically with just one click. And then down here, we'll talk about it some more in a minute, but basically this is where you build buildings, have your people gather resources, and then here you can manage what all your workers are doing. Before we get rolling, we'll talk about how to control your squads, how to control your people just a little bit. Operator. Pretty straightforward. You see this is the icon for your squad. You see that there's the bricks saying they're in this building, and they have guns. Over here we can see who is in the squad. They all have names, they have health, they have experience levels. So as they see some action, they'll start leveling up and they'll basically get better at everything that they do the longer you can keep them alive and keep them in action. We can see here they're all equipped with pistols. Eventually, if we get some gear, so like armor, you can equip it there. This section is how much stuff they're carrying. So at the beginning, they can carry 4 items, and we'll see how to scavenge those and move things around in a minute. And then down here, you can set their stance, like fire at will, move at will, and then some other things here to like order them around and do some stuff. So you left click on to select, you can left click to deselect. When you hover over them, you see a circle showing their weapons range. You can see that their vision is blocked a little bit by some of the buildings next to them. But for the most part, we can see a pretty good circle around them, which is a benefit of being in the tall building. So to have them move, you just right click and you'll see that it sets a line. So right now we're paused, so you see a line showing where they're going to go. As you see these controls down here, you can also shift click to queue up some orders, which the main thing we'll want to do with that is queue up going to buildings and then maybe returning to base automatically afterwards. The other thing, which becomes more important later, but your workers is basically everyone who isn't in a squad, is your citizens who are going to be doing all the other work. There are some children. We see there's some homeless people. We'll help fix that here in a minute. But we can see that right now we haven't ordered anyone to do anything yet, so they don't have any jobs other than the 4 people in our squad. But as we order them to do, as we create jobs, basically they'll automatically assign themselves to them. But we can come in here and micromanage it a bit and pull people off of one area to put them on another, depending on what you're wanting to focus on. But they will, for the most part, automatically do the stuff you assign. It's just if you want to be more efficient, you'll want to come in here and tweak the numbers a bit. All right, so that is basically all the essential controls. There are a few more keys, you can hit Q and E to rotate the camera. And one important key that the game will tell you about, but you'll want to know, is you can hit V to turn on scavenging mode. So now we see these question marks all over the map. And these are telling us that these buildings have not been searched yet. They have goods in them potentially that we can go scavenge, but we haven't visited them yet. Once we have, that question mark goes away. Most buildings have the question mark because they're just kind of generic, but there are special buildings. So like this one is a teaching facility. And the cool thing is sometimes these will be like real world libraries. We'll get assigned this, but sometimes it's just random too. But if we go here, we'll find, or are much more likely to find, scientific materials, which we need for research. You'll also see we got a few of those. So here, this one is a uniform services facility. So this will be kind of like, think of like a police station or something where you might find some better guns, some gear, more likely to find ammunition, grocery stores and things like that. If we find one, or more likely to have food. There's a few categories of things like that. But we are going to start with just the essentials. We need to get some canned food and anything else we can find to get started. If we click on our headquarters, we can see here, this is all the supplies we have. They're listed up here, but also we see they're in this actual building. So your goods physically exist in the world. They have to be carried around one by one. And eventually you'll have different warehouses where you'll store things. But all these supplies are not just abstracted away. They actually have a location in the game. And so like the capacity here is limited, and you'll need workers and people to actually move this stuff around. The first thing we want to do, we'll just click our squad, left click to select it, and then right click to start some scavenging.
We're on the move.
We can shift right click to have them explore all these buildings. And then we hit play and see that the squad takes off. They're on their way here. They'll go in the building, and then we'll see here the percentage. So they're scavenging. That's how long it takes them to scavenge the whole building and see if there's anything in it. They found 1 fuel and 1 ammo, so that's nice. They'll automatically bring things back to base once they get loaded up, but then they'll just keep searching and running around. The other thing we want to do is build a shelter, because some of our people are homeless right now. We saw 18 don't have a home because this starting building can't hold them all. And that makes the people unhappy, as is reasonable. So to build a new shelter, we'll click this here. There's different categories of buildings. Most are locked off to us at the start. We'll have to research to unlock those things over time. But we can build a shelter. Now you left click on it, and like I said, you won't actually build a new building for this. you're going to convert one of these abandoned buildings into a shelter. So we can come here and see, all right, this building can create 11 living quarters, 13. We need 18 total, but none of these nearby buildings are big enough. We don't want to come all the way over here because now our guys will need to defend these two separate locations. So we kind of want to keep things together, especially here at the start. So we'll do this one. And then also this building right here, sure. This is where it kind of gets tricky of trying to find like an ideal starting location because you're going to need to expand out. But the people are going to be living in these buildings. So at night, when the zombies come, you'll need to defend all of these buildings that you have people living in, which does become a factor in how you plan out your defense. Now that we've assigned some work, we see the workers come out. They're carrying their boxes of stuff. They're going to get to work. We see here how many of the needed resources have been delivered, and then what the progress is, and that there's 4 people working here. We can pull people off, but that's just going to make the progress slower, so we'll keep them assigned. And you see the people actually have to go to the location, carry the resources there, and then do the work. And then depending on the size of the building, it'll take more resources. So we need wood for this, and I found that early in the game, wood is kind of the limiting factor a lot, so you want to keep gathering wood basically constantly. And one way you can do that is by chopping down trees. So you click this button, gather wood, and then we're going to highlight a big area around our start. And now all those trees have turned blue. They've been assigned for chopping down, and we see workers going out to do that. The other way that you can get construction resources is by demolishing buildings. To do that, you just click on a building, and then you'll see here, this button lets you turn it into something else, but if you wanted to build something, or you hit deconstruct, and then that will send your workers out to tear it down, and then you'll see there how many resources you'll get. So it gives you a little bit of all the construction resources. And on some of the maps, I mean, basically every map's going to have a ton of buildings. So this isn't an unlimited source of resources, but it is, there's tons of buildings here, and we could keep tearing them down and getting quite a bit of resources to build up our base back at home. The one resource that is renewable is the trees. Eventually you can plant new trees and they'll grow back. But I found that early on, you're going to clear out these trees way faster than they're going to regenerate. So wood is going to be your limiting factor a lot in the early game. So focus on gathering a lot of it. Now you may have noticed one thing, that there's not any zombies about. And that's because in this game world, the zombies follow rules of they don't like the sun, so they don't come out during the day. And during the day, you're pretty safe. There are some other threats, so there could be other survivors that come along that are hostile, and you could go into one of these buildings and find that there is a zombie horde inside the building and your guys get in a fight. So there's a risk. Basically every building could have zombies in it. And sometimes you'll actually see the zombies roaming at night, and they'll go into a building, and then you can choose to go and clear them out during the day if you want to. But there's always a chance that your guys might randomly run into zombies also, just to have that in mind. Now, a few other things we might think about doing during the day while it's safe is building more buildings. We can build different kinds of walls. So there's barbed wire, and then there's wood, metal, and brick walls. And then also eventually you can research fortified walls, which are much more sturdy but more resource intensive. You can also build gates that your guys can move through, and they have little towers on them that people can defend from, or you can build standalone towers. So one other thing we'll build just as an example, we can throw up a wooden tower. Actually, I think I'll build the metal tower just because it's a little cooler. Sure, why not? And we see the ring around it so that your guys can engage at that distance. We can see where it's blocked. Its view is blocked by the buildings. So it's interesting, like if you get closer to this building, you can see over it. Versus if it's further away, it blocks the vision. So elevation, an important factor when you're planning out your defense like this. We will put this just kind of in the street here. As you play, you'll get a feel for where to place buildings. Because if I put this down, now I have to defend it. It can hold 2 people in it, and you can assign weapons to it. And it does function as a good defense point. But it is kind of like another standalone structure that the zombies can attack that you have to help defend, or have that in mind when you're building it. Now, when does it get dangerous? So night will set around 6 o'clock, and that is when the threat of the zombies coming out goes up. The zombies could pop out immediately. They could come from the edge of the map. You never quite know. Or like if they're in one of these buildings, they could, and you don't know that they're there, they could pop out and catch your squad unaware. And so it's always a danger the further you send your guys out, because they can't outrun the zombies. The zombies aren't necessarily like fast zombies, but they can move a little bit faster than your squads. So if your guys get caught in the open, it's a bad situation because they're going to die as they try to run back to the base. We can see our guys, so if they find more than they can carry, they'll leave it here and then they'll come back and get it. Right now they're taking back what they have to headquarters. Your first day will be like this. It'll be pretty quiet. You'll be gathering some resources. And a lot of the days afterwards will go like this too, of gathering resources, sending squads out to scavenge, and then getting everyone back to base at night to keep them safe. Though you can keep people out at night if you want to. It's totally your choice. It just gets a lot more dangerous. We can also create an additional squad. We'll come up here. It's as easy as hitting create squad. 4 of your people will be assigned to the squad, and they'll be automatically assigned weapons if they're available. Though do bear in mind, you can make up to 6 squads, but each squad you make is up to 4 people who are not available for other jobs. And the other limiting factor you'll run into real quick is how many people you have. Having 45 citizens seems pretty good, but you'll want a lot more than that because there's only so many hands to go around for all the tasks that you'll have, because there will be a lot to be done. Now, the nice thing, towards the end of the day, all your workers will automatically go home, so they'll head back to base. Your squads, however, will not, so you'll need to order them back to base, or choose what you want to do with them, but they'll be out there and exposed if you don't bring them home. Now, one nice thing, like I mentioned, you can click here on the radio and just hit all squads return.
Let's do it. All squads return to base.
And they'll all head home automatically. So we'll bring everybody home, and then we'll see what happens on our first night. Now, nighttime has set. No zombies have popped out just yet, but we've got our guys back at base. Just to briefly talk about strategy for defending your base. If you send everyone just back to your headquarters, you have to remember these other shelters, the people are living there, so they're exposed. If the zombies break down those walls, they'll kill them off, and you'll have less people. You'll have lost those people forever. So you'll want to maneuver your squads to defend all parts of your base. I try to put them where they're kind of giving overlapping fields of fire, so two squads can fire at zombies at the same time and help each other out. It can get a little micromanagey as you try to defend against the bigger zombie attacks as the game goes on, but here early on it's pretty straightforward. We'll set the game going and see if any zombies show up.
Waiting orders.
If your guys are set to fire at will, they'll just automatically shoot when zombies come near them. But you can also right-click zombies to be aggressive and go take the fight to the zombies. We haven't seen any yet. Your view is limited, but you'll get a warning whenever your guys do see some zombies running around. We'll speed it up, see if we get any bites on our first night here. And then morning comes around 6 or 7 in the morning, and that's when the sun comes back out and it's safe again to get back to work. And your workers will automatically go out, but again, your squads will not. So the squads are a little bit micromanagey in that you do have to kind of order them around all the time during day and night to keep them being productive. Well, it's been a very quiet first night here. We'll jump ahead and see if we can find some combat for you. Alright, so now I have found some combat. I don't know if something about this map did not have very aggressive zombies. We had to go to the 4th night before I found my first group of zombies. Totally atypical. Normally you see them every night. But I now have this squad. They got overconfident and caught out in the open, but that'll give us a chance to see how some combat works and why you want to defend from prepared buildings and not out in the open like this. Here's what some zombies look like in the game. There are different kinds of zombies and more to come later, but these are our standard human zombies. And we can see there are 8 of them versus our 4 people with pistols. Our guys will start shooting automatically when they're in range, but we can also right click to order an attack. And let's see what that looks like. Alright, so our guys survived. They took some hits, but they didn't get overwhelmed, so that worked out okay.
Let's do it.
Normally, you would want to defend from a building, and that would make it go much better. But one thing to be aware of is that if we just go into like this random building, that the zombies can come in and start fighting with your guys inside, which they can still take damage. If we are in a prepared building, which is basically your actual base building, so we can see the windows are all boarded up and everything, so the zombies can't get at your guys if they're defending from inside one of these buildings. The building has a health, so like 2,500 for our regular buildings, 9,000 for our headquarters. The zombies have to tear down all those hit points before they can get to your guys. So ideally you always want to defend from a building and not be fighting out in the open like that. But I got a little overconfident just sending them out trying to find some zombies because this map's being weird. But now we'll jump to a base that's a little further along to explain some of your long-term goals for our final section. So here we jump to a base that's a little further along on a different map that we can see is a bit more dense, a lot more buildings. We'll start getting, this is with the story mode on. Yeah, so this is following a story event. So if you play with story mode on, you'll get messages like that. But for this section of the starter guide, we're just going to talk about some of the long-term goals and how some of those things work as you progress through the game, out of the early game into the mid, and then eventually the late game. So we mentioned earlier the research tree, or the technology menu here. So basically there are a lot of things here you can research. They're pretty straightforward, but they're all useful. So some of the things you can do is set up like gun production for the different kinds of weapons. You can make your houses better. You can unlock the really strong fortifications. There is a few things for agriculture, so farming, greenhouses, canning food. You want to do all that kind of stuff to get your food more efficient for larger populations. And then as you go, most of these, there's only a few other ones. I'm sure this will be expanded later, but you can build out these things. The way to do the research is you'll need to turn a building into a research center. So just like you built a shelter, you come down here, but instead of that, you would find it here at the bottom, some of your special buildings. So like the research center, the med bay is like your little hospital. But the research center is kind of special because you have to build it, assign a few people there, and then to actually do the research, you need to find the scientific materials, which you will mostly find at the buildings with the blue icon on them. This map, just for fun, this map has kind of a little shopping area. So these are like real world locations. There's a bank, there's some restaurants, there's Twin Peaks, a salon, Starbucks. So you kind of see some fun stuff like that. You also see like there's the Target. So, you know, stuff like that will pop up, which is fun. But those bigger special buildings also typically have more of these special resources you're looking for. And as you go through the game, you'll research that stuff. you'll build more of your buildings. You'll want to set up like farms, and if you play with the tutorial and the story mode on, it'll walk you through most of this stuff. It'll tell you to build these things as you go. I didn't really mention the vehicles just yet. You can find vehicles as you go around the map, so you can find like a car, which is very useful because your guys can move around fast in it. It can also hold resources, so they can store some of their stuff in it before they have to come back to base. You can find like fuel tankers that can hold lots of fuel. And then this one's being repaired, so like if it takes damage, if anything takes damage, I should mention, you can click this little wrench icon to repair it. It'll cost some resources and some time, but like you can, once things get damaged, you can build them back up. So like these fences here, there was a big zombie attack the night before. Some of them got knocked down, but we can just click that button to get them repaired. Though it will take time, like someone will actually have to go and fix it. It doesn't just automatically happen. The other thing you'll see here is that I've got walls around this base. So I built up some some wooden walls, and then some metal walls, and then even some brick walls. So those are going to be different durability and use up different resources. As I mentioned, for me, wood was like the severe limiting factor. So you see here, I've built this stuff. I have 0 wood left. I have plenty of the other materials, but that I kept seeming to run out of wood. So keep an eye on that and consider, you know, do you need to build a bunch of wooden walls like I did that's going to suck up all your resources? But like I said, you can come in here, you can knock down these buildings and get a bunch of resources for building more stuff. And on a map like this, where there's like tons and tons of buildings, there's no shortage of doing that to get more construction materials. As you expand out your base, like I mentioned before, you just want to think about defense. How are you going to, the bigger your base is, the more people you're going to need to defend it, the more guns you're going to need, because you don't want your guys going in with melee combat. So the gate houses, whenever you build gates, they have little towers automatically. You can click on them to manage what kind of weapons your guys have. I believe they get the bow and arrows like for free, but it's not as good as the guns. So you'll want to assign some guns. You'll want to assign how many, up to 4 people can be in here. And this is a tower. 2 people can be in like a wooden tower, but 4 people can man the gate. And then you can actually pick which kind of guns you want to be used there. So like, yeah, the pistol is going to be better than the bow and arrow, but there's other options as well as you go. So as you expand, just keep in mind, how am I going to defend this base as you're laying it out? But as you play, you'll kind of figure that out. That's the fun of the game. That is basically concludes my starter guide here. My goal is not to get too nitty gritty on this, but just to show you the ropes and how easy it is to actually get into this game. You'll probably fail. My first base kind of got wiped out because I made some mistakes, but I learned from it. And then this base is going along pretty good, just gradually expanding, researching more stuff. I look forward to seeing more of this game in early access as they add more stuff and make the storyline further, get more of everything basically. But I do really like that you can pick real world locations. So there's basically endless maps based on real places, which is pretty cool and a unique thing about this game. With that, I will conclude the video. Thank you for watching an example of play. This is the starter guide, so there might be a more advanced guide later, or just a update later on in early access as more things get added to the game. If you do have any particular questions you'd like to see addressed later, please put them in the comments. Like and subscribe if you enjoy it, and keep watching this channel for more strategy and tactics gaming.